This is Standard Office Procedures, the podcast that helps professionals live and grow through culture, communication, and candor. Hey guys, and welcome back to yet another episode. I shouldn't say yet. That's like, oh, they're still coming. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Standard Office Procedures podcast. I'm your host, Grace, and with me is Shannon. Say hi, Shannon.
Hi.
Hi. And today we're going to talk about conflict styles.
Ugh.
It's fun.
I don't like conflict.
Okay, which is great because we're going to talk about your style as well.
So, is it avoidant?
It is. That's part of it.
That's my natural style. I think I've evolved.
You absolutely have. And we'll talk about how you can have your natural style and then how you, in certain situations, may slide into different styles depending on what the conflict itself is, what it calls for. So we'll cover it all.
Love it.
Are you excited?
No.
I want to preface this by saying Shannon has been battling bronchitis.
Yes.
So you may have a little coughing.
I may have a little coughing.
Okay.
I'm not contagious, guys. Don't worry.
Yeah. So if you're listening, don't worry.
Don't
you
worry.
won't get sick. I will say hold for coughing. You know, when they're like, when you're shooting or you're filming, they're like, hold for the truck because there's like a big truck going behind you. We'll do hold for coughing.
It's gotten a lot better, but
Yeah, it has.
you know,
She doesn't go to yoga anymore. Is it because you don't want to cough in the
I don't want
class?
to freak people out. Everybody acts like it's okay.
I know, not during this day and age. I don't know if you were in the class with me that I went to where I had a coughing fit during Shavasana. So like the end of yoga, if you guys aren't familiar, there's like the 5 or 10 minutes at the end of your yoga class where you go into Shavasana, which is like your recovery period, or it's like rest. It's basically like yoga nap time where you lay down and they play very soothing music.
Somewhat meditative.
Very meditative. And so a coughing fit, like I had a tickle in the back of my throat. And this was like during the pandemic, and I started to cough and I could not stop it. And so I got up and I just left.
And like the more that you try not to do it, the more you're just choking
100%.
on yourself. Yeah, I've done that. So
And
I'm like, you know what? I'll just live stream.
I just walked out of the building, but I didn't want to like stop and put my shoes on and be rude. So I just sat on the steps barefoot and waited for class to end. And then I went back in and I was like, I'm just going to grab my thing. Anyway, so Shannon may cough and there's conflict. That's kind of in a nutshell what's going to happen on this episode. So let's talk about what conflict styles are. So basically, we're going to talk about 5 specific different conflict styles. I'm sure if you really dig into it, you can come up with sub styles and more than just the 5. But these are the 5 basic conflict styles. And a conflict style these are the ways in which people choose to deal with conflict. So there's all kinds of different styles that we may take, and they're kind of dependent as well on the situation that we're in, right? So we may handle conflict differently with like our family or our partner than we would at work. And we're going to be speaking from a professional lens, but just keeping that in mind that you will adapt depending on the situation.
Yeah.
Nobody really is probably going to be one style all the time.
This kind of reminds me of the DISC assessment that we've done, the DISC personality assessment, because they talk about what your natural style is, and that's just who you are just in your natural life. And then your adapted style, which is usually who you are like at work, in your work situation. So I think that's kind of interesting. I feel like that's probably a little bit at play here. Like, what do you do at home with your friends, with your husband, with whatever, or like at work where you might take on a little bit of a different style? Yeah,
that is exactly right. I'm glad that you said that because we actually are going to talk a little bit about personality assessments and how they can kind of help you assess more or less where your conflict style is, and how you can kind of grow and maybe shift in something that might not be as comfortable for you conflict wise, but is more effective or, whatever, depending on your surroundings, your environment, I guess. Surroundings is not the right word. That's like when you're outside. Okay. Anyway, also remember that conflict is not an inherently negative thing, right? So when we talk about conflict, it does sound negative, right? Like it's scary. It sounds like there's a fight. It sounds like people are upset with each other. It sounds like you're like, by nature, the word conflict means there are 2 conflicting opposing things. Now, conflict is naturally occurring. Whenever you have a lot of people in a space, not even a lot, when you have more than 2 people or 3 people in a room trying to make a decision, any decision, even if you're working towards a positive goal, like the success of your company, conflict will arise. You want to hope it's like friendly, productive conflict, but it doesn't always have to be a big, scary thing.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things where practice makes perfect. If you practice allowing you, and this is what I was saying, how like I feel like I've adapted a lot. Like I used to be terrified of conflict, terrified. And I've adapted a lot where it was like, well, I'm just going to dip my toe in and see what it's like to play with a little bit of conflict, And I didn't die. And then the more that you do it and the more that you engage with it, the more that you realize it's not always this big, scary, terrible thing. It's normal and it's healthy. And it's the way that you grow together is by figuring out how to deal with conflict and disagreements.
Yeah, I love that you said that because It's funny because Shannon and we're so much alike, but we're so very different
Yeah.
in our kind of execution of things or the way we go about making things happen. And so Shannon, like you just said a moment ago, you have historically been more avoidant than anything else, whereas I historically have been more aggressive. And I feel like I've learned a lot from you on how to like sometimes, and we'll talk about these when we get into the styles too, like aggression can seem like the best way to approach conflict because you're just like bull in a china shop. Like I'm just going to go in and I'm going to knock it out and I'm going to handle it.
Yeah.
And that was always kind of how I thought was that. And also there's some truth to like, if you're the one who speaks the loudest and you're the one who takes the most real estate, generally they're the ones who win. But do you want to win or do you want to reach the best solution?
Right.
And for Shannon, like being avoidant, it's the flip side of that same coin where it's like she didn't want to win necessarily. She just wanted it to be over or not happen at all.
Yeah.
But then she was sacrificing what could have been the best solution. So we'll talk about all that stuff in just a minute. So there are 5 main conflict management styles. They are, like we said, avoidant, which is like it sounds. You're just not going to engage at all.
I'm not going to do it.
And I will say, I want to preface this by saying each conflict style has its place. So sometimes avoidant is kind of the way to go. And we'll talk about that too. Accommodating, which is like, look, I'm just going to kind of give in and do what they want because maybe it's easier, maybe it's not that important to me. But yeah, accommodating is what it sounds like. You're just accommodating everybody else. Compromising, which I think is the one that we talk about. That's kind of the most popular conflict style for professional workplaces because you're trying to make as many people happy as possible. So you may not reach a perfect solution, but you're just trying to reach one that is as satisfactory to as many people as possible and kind of an even across the board way. I always think of, for compromising, I think of, well, we'll get to this in a minute, but the Office episode with Angela and Oscar. Do you remember? Okay,
No.
we'll talk about it in a minute. If you guys know what I'm talking about.
Say it now.
Oh, I will. No, I'm going to talk about when we talk about compromising. And then collaborating. So that's what it sounds like, where you're going to go ahead and everyone's going to put in the time and effort to collaborate to come up with the ideal solution. So collaborative and compromising sound kind of similar, but compromising is it's almost a little bit like we just want this to be over.
Right.
We're going to go ahead and just compromise. And yeah, it's not perfect. It doesn't make everybody 100% happy, but everyone's about 70% happy and that's pretty dang good. Collaborating is we're going to put in the mental effort and take the time to find the perfect solution.
And I may end up not compromising because I may find that your idea was better, or maybe there's one piece of mine and 8 pieces of yours. That's a little different than compromise, which I feel like tends to be more 50-50.
Even, yes, exactly. And then there's competing, and competing is like, I want to win. And
we're going to battle this to the death.
Yeah. And I think that with stronger personality types, definitely sometimes with, we're going to talk a little bit about personality assessments and Enneagrams and things later, but I always think of like type 8s as they just, they want to win. They want to
be correct.
They want to be correct. And they're very confident that their idea is the best one. So I'm not even going to listen to y'all's really, because I'm going to try to convince you about why mine is the best idea.
Because if an 8 knows that they're not right or doesn't believe that they're, right, they're not going to engage in the conflict.
That's a fact.
They just want it to be correct and true.
And that's not the same not the same as avoidant, because avoidant is like this, I just don't want the conflict at all. 8s is like, I'm right, so I'm not even going to bother. Right. I'm sorry, I'm saying 8s. Not all 8s, but sometimes that can happen with competing conflict styles. It's a tendency. So let's talk about what to consider when you're choosing your conflict style. So again, like I said a minute ago, it's not that being avoidant is always wrong or being competing is even always wrong. You just have to look at the situation that you're in and take into account a few factors. So think about the importance of the issue. Is this worth it? Are we arguing about what snacks to stock the break room with? Which, hey, maybe that is a big deal to you. I did not mean to knock snacks. Or are you arguing about the future of the company as a whole and your role in it? There's certain times where maybe you're going to be a little bit more competitive or more aggressive than if it's just talking about stocking snacks. Your investment in the situation. So again, how personal is this to you? How involved are you in this?
Are you fighting somebody else's battle?
Unnecessarily. Are you standing up for the little guy, or are you just kind of fighting somebody else's battle for the sake of doing it? Which again, some people tend to do. The consequences of the situation. So the risks of this conflict. What happens if this conflict drags on too long? How quickly do we need a solution? Is this a situation where we just need to compromise and move on? Or do we have the space and the time to be collaborative?
What kind of political capital are you losing by engaging in maybe a less important conflict?
That's a really good point. Your relationship with the other person or people involved in the conflict. So think about that. That's really important. Are you comfortable with them? Do you feel like, is there a level of trust there?
Yeah, I was going to say trust later.
Like,
how big is the level of trust between you, and how comfortable are you that your relationship will survive certain types of conflict?
Exactly. The personality and communication styles of the other person and people or people. This one is so important.
Very important.
Yes. And this is kind of the difference when, like, do you want to be successful or do you want to just kind of get your way? And I think that oftentimes we don't consider the other people in the conflict enough.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, I don't mean like their ideas and opinions. I mean how they communicate. You know, are they being avoidant, or are they just more introverted? Are they just quieter? Are they being aggressive and rude, or are they just more excitable and, you know, more whatever?
Or have you taught that person to act that way, right? Have you shut somebody down so many times that they have either become aggressive because now they're lashing out,
right?
Or now they're becoming avoidant. They're like, what's the point?
There's no point even speaking up.
Yeah.
I feel like you're speaking from experience.
Huh.
How much time and energy do you have available for this? So if this is a massive tangle and you are swamped, do you have the time to get involved and mired in this thing? Or is it better to just be like, you know what, I'm going to be accommodating. I'm just going to say, yeah,
or maybe
go
it's
ahead.
time to just compromise. We don't have time to collaborate.
Yeah, we've tried to collaborate. We're running out of time. We're running out of resources. And are there moral issues or beliefs that you need to take into account? So this one's really important. And we'll kind of touch on this in a moment too, that it's all well and good to say, hey, look, I'm trying to keep the peace. I want to be avoidant. I am never telling you to be avoidant when it comes to standing up for something that is a moral issue for you. Right. If you're being mistreated, if you see somebody else being mistreated, we talked earlier about, are you fighting somebody else's battles? Which generally in the workplace, I'd say, hey, let everyone kind of take care of their own stuff. Now, if it's a moral or ethical issue and you see somebody is being stepped on or not treated fairly, then I would say that's a time to not be avoidant. But we'll kind of get into that in a minute. So those are some things to consider when choosing your conflict style. So let's kind of break down all of the styles. So let's start with avoidant. We've kind of already talked about this one, but essentially it just sidesteps the conflict entirely. You're just saying, you know what? Like, I'm just going to leave it be. It's either not my business, or I don't care enough about it, or I don't want to fight. And so you're avoiding entirely. So we can talk about when it's positive. So I think that an avoidant style is maybe the best route if the conflict has nothing to do with you. We talked about that a moment ago. So, I mean, not saying that if you're seeing somebody being mistreated, you're like, well, that's not my problem, that you should just walk away. But maybe it's about departments and work that it doesn't.
I mean, listen, we all have a lot of opinions.
Yes.
And if you're asked for those opinions, awesome. But we all know that the busybody in the office, that they just insert themselves into other people's conflicts all the time to express their opinion and try to help work it out. And it's like, is that your place? I mean, maybe sometimes it is, but a lot of times it's probably not.
And is it even helpful?
Yeah.
You know, like, are you providing helpful solutions, or are you just kind of talking to talk?
Also, don't you have work to do?
Yeah. Also, don't you have work to do? Again, maybe being avoidant is best if you don't have the time to deal with it. Or if you don't have a strong opinion either way, kind of like Shannon was saying, like if you're just like, look, I don't really know about this. This is kind of outside of my, wheelhouse, or like, I really don't care that much. You might want to go ahead and be avoidant. So there are times when being avoidant is appropriate. I will say though, if you know about yourself that you tend to be more avoidant than head on when dealing with conflict, and you find that it's not serving you well, like if A, you're never really able to vocalize your ideas, or B, that's kind of the biggest one for me, is like, are you just getting steamrolled all the time?
Well, do you, or, are you scared? Are you doing this from a place of fear?
Good point.
I think that was always a big thing for me. I was scared of how it would feel if, I said what I thought, what people would think of me, or dealing with the fallout. I thought too hard about what the fallout would be of just saying what I thought and being, upfront. And I felt like you're either aggressive or you're avoidant. I felt like there was no in between, which obviously is not correct.
Sure.
But that's the way it feels for somebody who tends to be very avoidant, is it's like, it's terrifying, right? And so that could be a time when maybe you need to experiment a little bit,
Practice
right?
a little bit.
Practice a little bit. See what it's like to do some more gentle, conflict resolution.
Yeah.
And dip your toes into it, because if you're constantly avoiding conflict, you are just limiting yourself.
Yeah, I feel like you're already taking yourself out of the running, and you're not allowing yourself the space to grow and become.
Yeah, it's that quote, like, a ship in harbor is safe, but that's not what ships are made for. It's one of my favorite quotes, because it is so true.
That's why I got a boat tattooed on my body. It's because of that quote.
Is it really?
It's an African proverb, I think. Yes, I'm obsessed with it. It's beautiful. I'm just kidding. I don't have any tattoos. Don't listen to this, Mom. No, don't tell anybody. All right. So the second conflict style that we're going to talk about is accommodating. So accommodating is just what it sounds like, right? That's when you're, and this is from generally like a first person. What am I doing? I am going to be accommodating. And that's basically saying like, look, you guys can choose, right? I'm going to go ahead and take my own opinion out of the running, or my own kind of dog out of this fight, because A, it's not that important. B, I don't have the time anymore. Kind of like what Shannon and I talked about before, about all these reasons why you may be kind of sidestepping the conflict. But
I feel like people that are more accommodating tend to be the peacekeepers.
Yes.
My father-in-law is a peacekeeper for sure, and my husband too. And they're very accommodating. It's not that they're scared of the conflict in general. They're just like, all right, what can I do to make you happy?
Yeah.
Right? How can we get through this and just find a resolution?
I do think that people who go for the accommodating conflict style tend to be a little bit more selfless. And I just want to make sure that if you find that you're being accommodating over and over and over again, that you're also taking care of yourself. Because it is easy. These two can kind of go, I feel like accommodating and avoidant can sometimes go hand in hand.
Yes.
Where you're just like, no, you guys, we're going to get pizza with pepperoni on it again, but you guys know I'm vegetarian. That's fine.
It's
Like,
fine.
it's fine. It's no big deal.
It's fine.
But maybe it's been happening for 5 weeks now and you're like, dude, I would really love it if we could get like a veggie supreme or something else, like mix it up a little, but you haven't actually vocalized that. And if you're not standing up for yourself when it's relevant,
avoidant is not taking part in the conversation at all.
Yep.
Accommodating is taking part in the conversation and just letting everybody else win.
Yes. It's completely, I mean, you're completely leaving your own wants and needs at the door in order to do what somebody else wants.
Yeah.
Which,
if you're familiar with the Enneagram, I feel like this is definitely a type 9 thing. I also think 2s can tend to do this.
I agree. I also say that. Yeah. 2s are very much, let me go ahead and take care of you. No, I'm fine. And again, that is all right in certain situations when that is really how you feel. When you're like, this is totally fine. I'm not that worried about it. Or when you're like, look, that does annoy me a little bit, but it's not worth it. I'm going to let it roll off my back. It takes a certain level of self-awareness and maturity, I think, to be a healthy accommodator. But again, reading the room and knowing, is this a conflict where it's okay that I can just kind of let
I
it
think
go?
2s and 9s in general, or people that are more in the accommodating conflict type, tend to be the type of people that don't really want to accept help.
Yeah.
And it's not because they're so independent. It's because they don't want to put you out.
Yeah, I think that's true. I also think that it's easy to kind of dismiss accommodating conflict style, choices as like the weaker choice or the more passive choice. Yeah. But I also think it's really important to remember that the purpose of conflict is not to win.
Right.
I think oftentimes some of us, and I'm including myself in this because I tend to get kind of tunnel vision, is I want to win. I want to be right. And that's not the point. The point is you're trying to solve a problem, right? It's usually collaborative. And you're trying to solve a problem, and maybe you aren't right. Maybe you haven't, thought of everything, or maybe you're missing information, or maybe somebody has more experience than you do. And that the whole purpose of the conflict is not for you to be right. It's for you guys to come together to create or find the right solution.
Right.
Sorry, I'm kind of stumbling over my words.
Well, I think, we framed the way that accommodating can be seen as a somewhat negative thing, or like you said, a more weak thing. I think that is such a mistake. And I also think, like we said, there's always a time and a place. There's definitely a time and a place for somebody to be accommodating. Like, it's not your fight, or you're letting other people hash this out, or you truly have reached a point where you're like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have a dog in this
Well,
fight.
and sometimes if you're just prolonging the conflict and it's just making stuff worse,
for the sake of what?
Yes,
Winning?
exactly.
Or just
for the sake
fighting
of just
for
being
fun?
like, well, now I'm digging my heels in, or two of you guys are digging your heels in, or, whatever it is. And then you decide, you have the moment of self-realization, like maybe you're not always an accommodating conflict style person.
Yeah.
Maybe you tend to be a little bit more competing, but you realize in this moment, you're like, look, this isn't getting me anywhere. And I'm, I've lost sight of the goal or whatever. And I'm going to now swap to accommodating. That is not weak. That is not passive. That is recognizing that's making a wise choice. So again,
I also think this can be a management style too, to let people figure things out on their own. It's not like I'm sitting by and watching them fail. It's like, okay, you know what? Like, let's try some things your way and let's see what happens. It's not a threat. I think that's the thing. Is like people see that as like a threat. That's a passive aggressive thing. But I think there's a healthy way of doing it.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about motivators. Like, why are you doing this? Are you doing it because you recognize that the wise thing to do in this moment is to accommodate? Or are you doing it because you're like overwhelmed and you're like, look, I'm scared, or I'm overwhelmed, or I'm mad, or whatever? Like, you have to think about what your motivators are.
Are you doing it because like, I'll show you, you're wrong.
Yeah.
And you're going to see.
And I've done that before. I've definitely done that before. And guess what? I was wrong. All right, now let's talk about the compromising conflict style. So again, I think this is the one that we're all the most familiar with and is kind of the most universal sort of make everybody happy
If you've
style.
ever been in a family.
Yeah.
Of any kind.
Yeah, I have 3 siblings, and compromise was like the name of the game, where, we all wanted different Pokemon games. And so instead, Mom was like, we'll get this other one that nobody wants, because then nobody's unhappy, but you still get a Pokemon game. And it was like, well, all right.
I feel like this is very common in families and also in like independent organizations that we're in outside of work. So maybe your church, or maybe like a volunteer organization or things like that, I think compromise tends to be because it's like, well, we're all volunteers and we're all just here because we ended up in this pot together.
Have equal importance and weight in this pot, you know.
So let's
it's
just
not like
compromise.
one person's calling the shots. Yeah. So the example that I always think of is from The Office, where Angela gets the poster of the baby playing the saxophone, remember? And Oscar doesn't want to look at it. He's like, that's creepy. I don't want to look at the poster. I want Angela to take it down. And they're like, well, no. And Angela's like, it's my poster and it's my workspace. And Oscar's like, it's creepy. And so the compromise that Michael comes up with, and he's like, this is a win-win-win conflict style.
Oh, doesn't he make a t-shirt?
So he puts it on a t-shirt and tells Oscar that he has to wear it on like Tuesdays and Thursdays or something. So that way Angela can see the poster, but Oscar won't see it.
I forgot about the t-shirt.
Genius.
Oh, that's so good. We've been rewatching a lot of Office episodes.
It's
and
so good. It's applicable.
There's actually, if you guys, this is just an aside, if you guys like The Office and you have Peacock, NBC streaming platform, they've started doing these Office super episodes, super fan
like
episodes.
Longer ones?
And they're longer. They include a lot of like unseen footage. And so they just released like season 4. So they're doing like one season at a time. But there's like these extra episodes that they're like amazing favorites that have tons of like great new stuff.
The Standard Office Procedures podcast is sponsored by Peacock.
I'm
just kidding. We're not.
I wish we were sponsored by The Office.
I do too. Anyway, so that is an example of compromise. That is obviously a silly example, but compromising is basically when you are you're trying to find the resolution that satisfies both sides of an argument, meaning that both sides of the conflict are going to have to lose a little bit of ground.
Something, everybody gives something.
Yeah, everyone's going to have to adjust a little bit to find a reasonable middle ground. So no one's going to win, quote unquote, here. Nobody's going to leave 100% satisfied. Generally, compromise means that people leave 70% satisfied or 50% satisfied. You know, you find something that's like, okay, it's like I was saying, like the best example of this for me as a child was my brothers and I all had Game Boy Colors. And we all wanted, like, my mom was like, I will buy one game and you guys can share the game. Like, I'm not going to buy 3 games. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's that crazy. I feel like she could have bought 3 games. But anyway, so I wanted like Pokemon Diamond. And my brother wanted like Pokemon Yellow and Liam wanted Pokemon Blue. And she's like, okay, well, you guys all get Pokemon Red. Because she didn't want to like show favoritism. So she was like, and it's one game and you guys can all play it. And we were like, okay.
Fine.
Like, fine. But that's the thing. Like, nobody was ecstatic with the solution, but it was
You
fine.
got Pokemon.
Yeah, we got to play Pokemon. So anyway, I don't think we need to go into detail too much on this one because I think everyone knows what it is.
I mean, I think that people tend to look like, oh, we're going to compromise. People think of compromise as being the best possible way of doing it. That's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of different ways of dealing with conflict. I think compromise is a way of ending something where everybody gets enough to feel satisfied enough.
Yeah.
You know?
The line we have written about it in our blog post that we're basing this off of is that it doesn't leave everyone satisfied, but it becomes necessary when finding any solution is more important than finding the perfect solution.
Yes.
So I think that's key, is like we've talked about before. Have you spent too much time on this? Are people getting very upset? Is this kind of getting out of hand? Or is it simply just, look, we need a solution now and we don't have time to like spend more resources collaborating into finding the perfect answer.
Yeah, there's no perfect solution. Everybody's pretty much got just as good of an answer, you know?
Yeah.
Let's compromise.
The Standard Office Procedures podcast is presented by Blue Summit Supplies. We're an online office supply store that puts you at the forefront of our focus by offering new career-building resources every single week. Sign up for our newsletter and visit our blog at bluesummitsupplies.com for free downloads, tools, and tips to make your job easier and more fun. Let's talk about collaboration and how similar that is to compromise. So collaboration is another conflict management style where it's exactly what it sounds like, where you guys are going to go ahead and collaborate and put in the time and the resources to figure out, hopefully, a perfect solution, right? An elegant, ideal solution. This style seeks to find, like, again, we were talking about The Office. It's like the win-win, the ultimate win-win, right? I want the win-win-win. I want to make sure that you are happy and I'm also happy. And a compromise is just not going to be good enough here because I think we can do better. I think that instead of sacrificing something for everyone to have a little bit, I think that we can create an answer where everyone gets exactly what they want.
Let's get all the tools out on the table. I feel like this is like, hey, we need to clean the closet, right? And so if I'm going to compromise, maybe I'm going to go buy some organizers and I'm going to organize part of the closet.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
It's somewhat organized, but I didn't really get everything out, you know, and I feel better. And collaborating is like, let's get everything out of the closet. Let's look at what we have in front of us and then let's form a plan and then let's take the best foot forward, right? Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily mean a compromise. It might. It might not.
Yeah, it might end in a compromise or it might end in completely new solutions.
Maybe you need organizers. Maybe you just need to get rid of a bunch of crap.
Maybe you need a new house. But I
Ooh,
do think that it's important to
wonderful.
remember that for collaboration, it's necessary to adopt this style when the relationship between the parties is important, right?
Yeah.
So when you're not trying to just like close the book and be like, you know what, just compromise and call it a day. You're trying to make sure that everybody's happy. So the relationship between the people is usually key here. The views of multiple stakeholders must be must be represented. So by that, I mean that like if there's several people involved, everyone's views and like opinions carry equal weight. And so if that's the case, it's collaboration time. And when the final solution carries too much weight to afford a compromise. So this is like a big, big deal.
This is going to be time consuming, I feel like.
It is. Yeah. Collaboration is inherently more time consuming than compromise because compromise, you're like, look, we got a problem. Let's solve it. Let's try to figure this out and knock it out because we got stuff to do. Collaboration is like, we're setting up meetings.
It's time consuming and it's something where you need to come to it with a healthy level head and not a ton of like up and down emotions.
Yeah.
Because that's
a really good
not
point.
going to work for collaboration.
Yeah. And you have to be open and receptive to what other people are saying.
Yeah. You have to be open and receptive. So if you are, if you're a person or somebody that's involved in this that tends to just see their side and they're not going to see another side,
Still yourself.
That's going to take a little work.
It's going to be a little bit of a bumpy collaboration, but it might still be effective. So speaking of somebody who tends to only see their side, let's talk about the competing conflict style. Cool. So this is exactly what it sounds like. You're competing. You're not in a conflict situation to compromise or find the best collaborative solution. You're in it to compete, and competing means you're in it to win. So people who compete for conflict styles generally take a firm stance and they refuse to budge until they get what they want. So again, there is a time and place to be a competitive conflict. I always want to say styler. What? to choose the competitive conflict
stylist.
Stylist. There is time and place. And like we said at the beginning of this episode, if it's something about your moral convictions and, somebody's being mistreated or you guys are doing something in the company that is, you're just like, that's not okay with me. That's wrong. And they're like, well, we'll find a compromise here. And you're like, no, this is wrong. And I'm taking a stance and I'm digging my heels in. And this is how I feel about it. And you guys, there's a line from, I'm going to actually quote Captain America here. It's from one of the Captain America movies. But it's, what's her name? Sharon Carter. It's Peggy Carter's niece. Oh my God. If you guys are listening to this and you know Marvel, I'm impressed that I knew that. Anyway, but she says, basically, she's like, when the world tells you to move and it's about something that you have a lot of strong convictions in, you plant yourself like a tree and you say, no, you move. And I feel like that is acceptable only in like moral dilemmas.
Yeah.
Now, when you're just having some conflict and you need to reach a solution and it's not some moral quandary or some ethical issue and you're being competitive, you're making it very hard for people to work with you.
Jerk.
Kind of. Yeah. I'm glad that you said it because basically you're not being a jerk. Yeah, you're totally being a jerk because you're trying to find, there needs to be a resolution because if there's conflict, there needs to be a resolution. You just can't have open conflict forever. And if you are refusing to take in other people's ideas or to consider that your idea might not be the right one, what?
Yeah.
Nobody's going to want to work with you.
Ew.
And you're closing yourself off from potentially better ideas than the one that you have. And maybe your idea is the best one. Maybe you were right. Maybe you're like, look, we're talking about marketing and I'm in marketing and I have all these people who are telling me, hey, I think this is better and they're wrong.
Yeah. And
you're being really competitive about it. That's not the most effective way to do it.
No.
The most effective way to get what you want in that scenario is to be collaborative or to be, maybe compromising a little bit, but to be open and kind and receptive to other ideas. And you may find at the end of the conversation that they all agree and they're like, you're right. Your idea was the best. You quote unquote win.
Yeah.
But that's not why you're doing this. You're not trying to win.
I kind of think about competing as like, if your ideas or the two sides of the conflict were candidates in an election, right? And like, there's going to be a debate and somebody's going to win.
Yep.
Like you can't both win. Somebody ends up winning. So there may be a time and a place where this happens, right? Like maybe we're voting on, are we going to have pizza or Chinese food? We cannot have pizza and Chinese food. There's one or the other.
Yeah.
State your case.
I wish you could have them both.
Me too.
Do you remember one time at lunch, Jessica and it was Justine, I think. She came up and she's like, what do you have for lunch? And I was like, I was kind of thinking about getting sushi. And she was like, I was thinking about getting Chick-fil-A. And
I remember
was like,
that. We had a sushi Chick-fil-A feast.
Did. And we were
like,
what if we had both? It was amazing. Anyway, that's collaboration. That's a good example. All right. So we talked a minute ago about how important trust is. So we covered the 5 major conflict styles and kind of where they're appropriate and how they operate. Let's talk about why trust matters so much when it comes to conflict in general. So you think about places where you have conflict and you feel safe. So maybe it's your relationship. Maybe it's with your family. Maybe like I feel very comfortable fighting with my brothers because I know at the end of the argument, I know they're still going to love me. Even if they're being a jerk and I'm like, you're being a real jerk right now. Here's why. I'm going to give you a piece of my mind. At the end of the day, they may be a little mad and we may be a little pouty with each other, but like they're still my brothers.
Yeah.
And that's because we've had 30 years to build trust with each other. And I also know, I know them. I know who they are. They know me. There's trust. When it comes to the workplace, that's hard, right? It's difficult because we're all kind of in this soup pot with a bunch of random people. Soup pot.
That's fun to say.
With a bunch of just kind of, and I say random, but in a sense, like the people that I see at work every day are not people that I probably would have connected with had I not worked here.
Right.
And I love them all and I like them all a lot, but they're, I think we gravitate friendship wise towards people who are similar to us and that we feel comfortable with, that it's very easy to build trust with because I'm like, oh, I recognize things in you that make me feel comfortable or, whatever. Right. Whereas at work, it's harder to have that trust.
Yeah. And the strongest organizations are the most diverse organizations that have all different kinds of people with all different kinds of styles
and viewpoints and ways of approaching.
And it can be hard to connect with those people personally. Mm-hmm. Even if you work somewhere a long time, there are certain people that you have a hard time connecting with. So it can be hard to build trust up with them.
Yes. And trust is key because say, okay, I'll just use me and use an example, Shannon, because I think you're an easy one. But if there's somebody new at my company and they come in and they're a little higher than me on the totem pole maybe, and they're trying to tell me how I should do something better, how I can improve my job, right? And they really are coming from a place of they mean well. I don't know what their motivations are. Like, you don't know me.
Yeah. What
are you doing? Are you coming for my job? Are you trying to undermine me in front of my boss? Like, what's your deal? I don't trust them. I don't know them. Now, if Shannon comes to me and she's like, hey, I think that you could do this better, this way, this way, this way. I know Shannon. I trust Shannon. I'm like, okay, I am so receptive to that. Way more than this person that I'm like, what's your whole deal? Right. And that I think is kind of a very oversimplified version of why trust is so important.
Right.
If somebody you trust comes in and you guys are having conflict, you feel safe. You know that they most likely you can trust that they have your best interest at heart as well as theirs. You guys are working towards a shared goal and you know that. There's a bunch of pieces that you're like, okay, this is fine. We can argue more or less and it's comfortable. Whereas somebody else comes in, they're doing that and you're like, I don't know. And you're way more likely to be defensive and offensive and take things personally.
I think there's also something to trust where like, you know what to expect from somebody, right? And that just comes with experience and time. And it's not even necessarily, I trust that you're going to be on my side or I trust that you're still going to love me at the end of this. It's that I know what to expect.
That's a good point too. Yeah.
Right. And so there are certain people that I work with more that I know what to expect if I take some conflict to them. Not only do I know what type of style to use with them or how to work with them to figure it out, but I know what to expect because we've done it before. Whereas if it's somebody I've never done that with, we talked about this on our, we had a leadership team offsite, kind of a day retreat. And we talked about, conflict and how we can better deal with conflict with each other because we are all very nice and very respectful, like to a fault.
To a detriment, yeah.
And so we're talking about how like building up trust between maybe members of the team that we don't work with very much, or maybe we do work with a lot, but we just aren't connecting and how we can build up that trust so that like, if I have a problem or an issue, it's not as big of a deal for me to bring it to you because I know how you're going to react. I know you, right? And so that's what I think when we talk about trust in the workplace, it's a little different than like trusting my friends.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, I'm friends with some of the people I work with, but it's different. It's knowing what to expect from somebody.
Which inherently takes some of the scary out of it, right? Like when so much of our fear is rooted in the fear of the unknown.
Yes.
It's, I don't know what's going to happen. And that is scary. And that makes me less likely to do it at all. Whereas when you have somebody, when you trust them, that takes away the element of, I don't know what's going to happen, which is key, which makes you less likely to be avoidant in situations where you maybe need to be a little bit more head on.
And do I trust that like when I come to you, you're not going to fly off the handle. You're not going to be angry. You're not going to hold a grudge for 3 weeks. Like you're going to take it in stride. Might be a little weird for a little bit and then it's going to be okay, right? There needs to be that trust that you build up. If somebody doesn't trust you from that perspective, like you're screwed.
Yeah, no, that's totally true. So how do you build trust within a team? So that's kind of like the $1 million question that I would love it if somebody had a more elegant answer than the ones I found. But really it kind of comes down to team building activities. Otherwise, if you don't put a concerted effort into like effort and resources and time into activities or, events that kind of organically allow for employees to build trust with one another, it's going to take a lot longer within the office, like a lot longer, because we're all so busy with our work. There's not really a ton of, I don't know, depending on your workspace, but Generally in most offices, it's not like everybody's collaborating all the time. People do a lot of heads down work and people are pretty siloed. And so you have to put forth the effort to creating these environments, whether it's an escape room or, a team retreat or to, I don't know, there's like mental health retreats. There's also like, you can do like a volleyball game, like whatever you want, where people are kind of working together and connecting and doing it outside of the office and doing it in a space. Like different parts of your brain light up depending on different activities that you're doing. And when we're at work, our brains are in work mode. We're in kind of a defensive, closed off slightly, like we're like shelled up little creatures because we're busy and we're working. Whereas when we're doing social activities or, collaborative activities, we're more receptive. Everything's a little bit more open. And that's how trust is built.
Yeah.
And so you need to start putting, I say you need to, it is advisable if you would like a trusting workplace that you start putting resources into creating environments where people can start to have these connections.
And I know we've talked before about like, you can't just do it one time and be like, well, we did a team build.
Yep. We built it. The team is built. That is not how it works.
It is constant.
It has to be regular.
Ongoing.
We, so this is actually one of my kind of goals for the new year is that I'm trying to do one team building event a month, which I know seems like a lot, but team building events don't have to be big, cost. What's what I'm looking for?
Expensive.
Yeah, big expensive, things. They can be as simple as like, I'm trying to do it where, we just kind of all get together in the office on a Friday and we sit around and Owen's going to grab us some growlers of beer and that's going to cost maybe $60 for 30 people to sit around. Well, I guess there's 20 of us now in the Huntsville office. But oh my God, I don't know how many of us there are. 25?
I don't know.
God, there's so many now. Anyway, but it's just a place for everyone to come kind of hang out and talk. So it doesn't have to be we're going to an offsite thing where we're going to pay a lot of money.
$1,500.
Yeah. But then again, we may do one of those
Sometimes
this
we
year.
do those
yeah,
too.
we may do a more expensive one. I'm not sure yet, but it's kind of, we're trying to do something so it's consistent and regular. And with consistent, regular sort of openness, that's how you eventually build this environment of trust.
Yeah.
I will let you guys know if it works.
And I think, there's other things we've done. Like, I feel like our curiosity labs we've talked about before where, once every couple of months you're paired up with somebody else in the company randomly and you get together and you talk about problems you're having. So that's kind of a distilled version of what it is. But I feel like that is a version of team building because you're connecting with people you don't usually connect with. And you're kind of talking about things you don't usually talk about, things that aren't your job, things that aren't your problems with somebody else. And it helps get you in somebody else's shoes and look at things from their point of view. It makes it a lot easier when you talk to that person. Like, I know that I've had some curiosity labs with people that that I didn't know that well. I didn't really know what they did. I didn't really know a whole lot about them. And after I had that conversation, I was like, oh, this is great. Like, we're buddies now.
Yeah.
I get it.
It broke the ice.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's key. Well, Shannon, after today, do you feel ready to go and resolve some conflict?
Yeah, I'm going to go beat somebody up.
You're going to do competing.
I'm going to go compete.
I'm going to avoid your competitive conflict. So good luck reaching me. All right, guys. We'll see you in a week. Thanks for listening. This has been a Blue Summit Supplies production. Good job, Larry.